In January 1863, the Civil War was going badly for the North. Defeat after defeat, soldiers deserting, the country sick of the slaughter. And Abraham Lincoln did something that looked, on its face, like a mistake. He handed command of the whole Army of the Potomac to a general named Joseph Hooker, a fine soldier who had two ugly habits. He'd been quietly undercutting the man above him, and he'd been going around saying what the country really needed was a dictator. Lincoln knew all of it. He also knew the war itself might turn on whether this gifted, dangerous man could be steadied instead of provoked. So he sent Hooker a letter along with the promotion, and look at how he built it. He opened with the truth, and the truth happened to be praise. I believe you to be a brave and skillful soldier. You have confidence in yourself, which is a valuable quality. You don't mix politics into your work, and you're right not to. Only then, once the man was leaning in instead of bracing, did the blade come out. And even then it was wrapped in respect. I've heard you say the army and the government need a dictator, Lincoln wrote. Well, only generals who win battles get to set up as dictators. What I'm asking from you now is military success, and I'll risk the dictatorship. He closed not with a threat, but with a push. Beware of rashness, but go forward and give us victories. Hooker, who could have been humiliated, was moved instead. He later said it was just the kind of letter a father might write to his son. That's the whole subject of this episode. When a leader has to cut, he doesn't cut like a judge handing down a verdict. He cuts like a surgeon, and a surgeon numbs before he ever picks up the knife. This is the hardest stretch of the whole book. Everything before it was about winning people over. Now we get to the moment we all dread, when someone has genuinely done it wrong and you have to tell them so. There are 5 moves here, and every one of them does the same quiet thing. It protects the person's pride while you make the cut. The first move is to criticize so gently that the person barely feels accused. Charles Schwab, the steel man again, was walking through one of his mills and came on a group of his workers smoking, directly under a sign that read, "No smoking." He didn't point at the sign. He didn't ask if they could read. He walked over, handed each man a cigar and said, "I'll appreciate it, boys, if you'll smoke these outside." That was it. They knew that he knew they'd broken the rule, and because he let them keep their dignity, they'd have walked through fire for him. John Wanamaker, who built one of the great department stores, did the same kind of thing on his daily walk through the Philadelphia shop. He spotted a customer waiting at a counter, ignored, while the clerks chattered in a knot at the far end. He didn't call anyone out. He stepped quietly behind the counter, served the woman himself, handed the purchase to the clerks to wrap, and walked on. Not one word of reproach, and the point cut deeper than any scolding could have. Often the difference comes down to one tiny word. Listen to a parent praising a child. "I'm proud of your grades this term, but if you'd worked harder at algebra," the child stops hearing the praise the instant that but lands. Now it's plainly just the runway for the real message, which is failure. Swap one word. "I'm proud of your grades this term, and if you keep that up, the algebra will come right along with the rest. Nothing else changes." But now there's no sting to flinch from, and the child believes you. You can hand someone a mistake the way you'd hand them a gift, carefully, and without making them feel small for taking it. The second move is harder, because it costs you a little pride up front. Before you tell someone what they did wrong, admit that you've done the same, or worse. In the autumn of 1908, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany gave a newspaper interview so reckless it set fire to half of Europe. He announced that he was practically the only German who even liked the English. That he'd personally drawn up the war plan that helped Britain beat the Boers. On and on, each boast more incendiary than the last. The continent erupted, and the panicking Kaiser turned to his chancellor, Prince von Buelow, and asked him to stand up and take the blame, to tell the world it was all the chancellor's bad advice. Von Bülow's first instinct was to protest that no one would ever believe him capable of advising such things, which, of course, told the Kaiser he was a fool, and the Kaiser exploded. "You think I'm a donkey who could never have made blunders you'd have avoided?" Von Buelow saw his error a half-second too late. He'd criticized before he'd praised. So he reached for the other man's pride. "Your Majesty," he said, "you far surpass me in so much in the sciences, in the workings of the barometer and the telegraph, things I could never understand. I only have a little history and politics to offer." And the Kaiser melted on the spot. "Haven't I always said we complete each other?" He beamed, and went around for the rest of the day swearing he'd punch anyone who said a word against his chancellor. The man humbled himself and bought himself a friend for life. You don't need a throne for this. When Carnegie went to correct his 19-year-old niece for some beginner's mistake, he caught himself and started over. "This is no worse than 100 blunders I made at your age. In fact, you've got more sense at 19 than I did." The fault was the same fault. It just stopped being an attack. The third move is almost mechanical, and it works on nearly everyone. Stop giving orders. Ask. The biographer Ida Tarbell once interviewed a man who had shared an office with Owen D. Young, the head of General Electric, for 3 years. He, in all that time, he said, he never once heard Young give a direct order. Young didn't say, "Do this or don't do that." He said, "You might consider this. Do you think that would work?" Hand back a clumsy letter and it was, "Maybe if we put it this way it would read better." He let people arrive at the fix themselves and keep their pride while they did it. Now the opposite. At a vocational school, a student parked his car where he shouldn't have, blocking a doorway. An instructor stormed in and roared, "Whose car is that? Move it now or I'll wrap a chain around it and drag it out." The student was dead wrong, and it didn't matter. He resented that man from that day on, and so did the whole class, who spent the rest of the term making his life miserable. A simple question: whose car is that? If we move it, everyone else can get through. Would have gotten the car moved and cost him nothing. An order commands a person's hands. A question recruits their mind and leaves their pride intact. The last move is the one we forget in the heat of being right. Let the other person keep their dignity. General Electric had a delicate problem named Charles Steinmetz, a true genius of electricity, the man who helped electrify America, and a complete disaster at running the department they'd put him in charge of. They couldn't afford to lose him, and they couldn't afford to wound him, so they didn't demote him. Invented a title, consulting engineer. That was, in truth, the work he was already brilliant at, and they quietly slid someone else into the management job. Steinmetz kept his standing and his pride. The department got a competent head. Nobody had to be humiliated, and there was no storm. This is the thing we trample most. We're so busy being correct that we'll embarrass a person in front of their colleagues to prove a point that needed no proving. The pilot and writer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry put the whole principle in a single line. "I have no right to say or do anything that diminishes a man in his own eyes. What matters is not what I think of him, but what he thinks of himself." Even when you're completely right, taking someone's dignity is the one move that never ever pays you back. So look at the five together. Open with honest praise. Aim at the mistake, never the person. Go first with your own faults. Ask instead of order. And never cost anyone their dignity. They're not 5 tricks. They're 1 discipline. The surgeon's discipline. Every one of them is a way to make the cut without leaving the patient worse than you found them. Because anybody can tell another person the truth in a way that wounds. That's the easiest thing in the world, and it feels good for about 10 seconds. The leader does the harder thing, tells the same truth in a way that heals. The point was never to win the moment, or to prove the fault was real. The point was to fix it, and still have the person on your side when you're done. Get that right often enough and something rare happens. People stop bracing against your corrections and start trusting them, because they've learned you'll never use the truth to make them smaller. But correction is only half of leadership, and honestly, it's the lesser half. The other half is what you do when someone gets something right, or even a little less wrong than yesterday. The book's final principles flip the whole thing around. They're not about cutting at all. They're about lifting. Praising the smallest flicker of improvement until a person chases more of it, and handing someone a reputation so good they'll break themselves trying to deserve it. It turns out the fastest way to change a person isn't to tell them who they're failing to be. It's to tell them who they already are. Next time, a reputation to live up to.